My name is Jeff, and I'm joined as always by my good buddies Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
And then another good buddy from many years, a gentleman that I know from our educational background and from being a fan of his literary output. It's Frank Hayde. How you doing, Frank?
Great, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we jump into the topic, I would love for you to regale our audience with the types of books you have written and the one that you have most lately written.
Thanks for the opportunity to promote myself. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So my first book, my first real serious commercial book was called The Mafia and the Machine, the story of the Kansas City mob. And this is a 100-year history of organized crime and politics and how they overlapped in Kansas City, Missouri. That book led to another book, Italian Gardens, a history of Kansas City through its favorite restaurant. And Italian Gardens was an iconic place in Kansas City, and it was sort of a microcosm of the city itself. So that was a really fun book to write. After that, I wrote a book called Stan Levy, Jazz Heavyweight. Stan Levy was a well-known jazz drummer who helped develop bebop music with Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. But he was also a heavyweight boxer. So very interesting life. And that's a really fun biography, especially if you're into jazz. And then now I've just released my latest book, Mafia Dreams, a true crime saga of young men at the end of an era in Kansas City. So that's the summary right there.
Hey, that's pretty great. I got to enjoy The Mafia and the Machine and learn about those two elements and how they shaped the city that we're both from, Kansas City. And that was incredibly educational, especially as somebody who learned about the mob from Godfather and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but then to understand its precedent in the terms of the machine and how they got stuff done for better, for worse, for persons who needed stuff done. So I am currently reading Mafia Dreams. So here it is on the Kindle.
Nice.
Haven't gotten as far as I'd like to yet, but since you do have some background in writing about persons who are involved in the criminal world, we thought it'd be fun to chat with you about your writing, but also to do it within the context of our show, which is a ranking of a top 4. And this time around, we're going with top 4 real life mob nicknames. So Michael and Richard will be a team, and they'll go up against our guest, author Frank Hayde, and we'll each kind of mention a mob nickname and maybe any kind of background you want to provide about the person who sported that moniker. So Frank, you're our guest, so you will go first, sir.
Okay, so my first choice for the Mount Rushmore of mob nicknames is Willie the Rat Comisano out of Kansas City, Missouri.
Gotta go hometown. You know.
Yeah, you got to go hometown right off the bat. So there's 3 reasons I chose this name, and the first is the irony of it. You know, as colorful as they are, mob nicknames are usually lacking in irony, at least I think so. I mean, they're usually just so literal, right? I mean, You take a guy like Ice Pick Willie Alderman. I mean, you know right away how he got that name, right? It's self-explanatory. But Willie the Rat had this name that might seem like the most insulting nickname possible in the mob, because in the mob, a rat is a snitch or an informer or a cooperating witness. So in that world, there's nothing worse than being called a rat, and the only good rat is a dead rat. So, but the irony here is that William Comisano never ratted on anyone, and he was exactly the type of stone cold gangster who would have rather chewed and swallowed handfuls of gravel than to snitch on even his worst enemy.
Okay.
Who was likely to face a fate much worse than getting ratted on, right? So that brings us to the second reason why I chose Willie the Rat, and that's the sheer scariness of it. You know, it's said that he got his nickname for disposing of his murder victims in the sewer system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, this might sound like urban myth, but I don't think anyone in law enforcement or anyone who knew William Comisano doubted it for a minute. If you read my new book, Mafia Dreams, you probably won't doubt it either, because it kind of delves into some of that. So it's a good chance to learn some more about that. But, let's face it. I mean, that's some scary stuff, right? You're earning the nickname Willie the Rat because you kill people and stuff them in the sewers. Now, we've got to give Willie his due, of course, and give him a chance to give his take on things. And according to him, his nickname was actually Willie Rats. It wasn't Willie Rat. It was Willie Rats. And he said that he got the nickname because when he was just a boy living in the north end of Kansas City, back when, that was a very poor, crowded, really basically, ghetto environment, a lot of his neighbors had rats, and he had a rat terrier. And so they would call on his services to come over with his dog to rid their property of rats. And so that's how he got the name Willie Rats, according to him. So,
that's when grammar really comes into play, because it could have just been like right. Willie apostrophe S Willie's Rats, and it just opens up a whole new business that he could have trademarked and gone into that if it's legitimate.
Or it could have been just sort of an exclamation, rats.
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 And he that was probably his first business. Like, Michael said, he was quite the entrepreneur, as most of these guys are, right? So he got started when he was really young. I mean, I kind of doubt he was providing that service for free. He was probably charging a pretty penny to bring his dog over and kill all your rats.
I'm super excited.
But either way, whether he got the name from his rat terrier, or whether he got it later for killing people and stuffing them in the sewers, either way, this nickname emphasizes the reality of the term underworld. We tend to think, not really take that term literally, and think of the underworld as a shadow economy or a shadow government. And when we think about the mafia life, we often think about glamorous things like fine restaurants or Las Vegas casinos or expensive clothes. But Willie the Rat really reminds us that some elements of organized crime are conducted literally underground, where the rats roam, sewer systems, shallow graves, tunnels. It might be glamorous in some way, but the life is also very grimy and gritty and guttural. And Willie's nickname really, I think, illustrates that side of the organized crime life. So again, my first choice for Mount Rushmore of nicknames would be Willie the Rat.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I'm excited about all these that choice and then ones to come. And I'm just curious to think if there's a nice moniker. Jimmy Kind Eyes Comisano.
Well, I think there were some that were, flattering, like Handsome Johnny, or something like that. But no, I don't think any of these guys wanted touchy-feely nicknames. That's for sure.
Good with kids.
I think this Willie the Rat thing, it has such like a deep like Batman vibe to it, where some trauma or something that happened in his early life just led him to an entire rat-based lifestyle that forever will dominate. He started out maybe just ratting with his dog, and then eventually he gets older and involved in more lascivious things, and then of course on his mind is I gotta send him to the rats down in the sewer. It's the only thing I know it from a kid. And my parents were, murdered in front of the movie theater. The cheese shop.
Yeah. His creation myth was hung upon him, whether he liked it or not.
Yeah, and you're actually kind of onto something there, Michael, because he was a real blue collar gangster. I think he made a lot of money, and he had a leadership position, like in the upper echelon of the outfit. And there's pictures out there where he's wearing fancy duds, like silk suit, head to toe, looking sharp, right? But that wasn't he was known for wearing like overalls and like a cheap trucker cap, and driving an old beat up pickup around town. And he had a bunch of junk in the back of his pickup, antiques and stuff like that he was collecting. And I think he ran.
Are you sure this isn't Fred Sanford?
You'd have to take that one up with Willie the Rat there.
Yeah, apparently.
I love that Willie the Rat sinking Louis the 14th armoire. All right, so Richard, why don't we jump into your choice, if you don't mind, please?
Yeah, my first choice, and I think it's kind of the opposite in many ways of what Frank was talking about. This is a nickname for someone who is definitely more of a upper echelon sort of dresser and someone who considered himself a purveyor of the finer things in life, and a nickname versus the last one that is, and as Frank said, some of these nicknames are completely on the nose, which is why I love a lot of these nicknames. In this case, it's Salvatore Avellino, who's was a capo with the Lucchese crime family in New York. And his nickname was the Golfer.
Huh.
You want to know why he got that nickname, Jeff?
To frighten anybody within earshot of the potential menace of a guy with a 9.
He will slice you up just like he slices a 9-iron.
I'm assuming it's doing deadly business with the tools of a golfer. Is it?
No, it's just that he loved to golf. He was a golfer. Like I said, Jeff, some of these nicknames are frighteningly on the nose. I mean, I could go through a whole, just the list of people whose nicknames are just, he's the this, he's a that.
Yeah.
He's just, there's not a lot of creativity with a lot of these nicknames.
Okay.
You don't get a sense that they had a writing room.
Yeah.
Working on what's the best. Like, this isn't The Sopranos where they could sit down and come up with the most colorful, wonderful nicknames for all of these people. Sometimes it's just like, hey, Sal, he likes to golf.
Yeah.
Check out the golfer over here.
Yeah. Mikey's
he's the golfer.
Certified Notary Public.
Yeah, check out the Notary Republic over here.
Hey. Okay.
There was that scene in The Sopranos, where the guy beat somebody half to death with the golf club.
True.
Yeah. I love it.
And he was a
Lucchese.
He was a driver for a mob boss known as Anthony Corallo, whose nickname was Tony Ducks.
Yeah, I love it.
Which I don't know exactly how the Tony Ducks. Basically, it came from Lucchese being amazed at his ability to duck convictions. So once again, hey, Tony Duck something. Next thing you know, he's Tony Duck.
It wasn't for his
Richard,
limbo.
You got to admit
it wasn't for his limbo
creative
abilities.
I think that one's pretty creative. Tony.
Yeah, that one's more creative than the golfer.
Yeah. All right. So, are we expecting too much from these gentlemen? Creativity and such. I don't know. We'll see as we move on to these choices. Yeah. What are you saying, Michael?
It's kind of like a situation out of like Anchorman when what's his name? The kind of the slow meteorologist is just like, I love lamp.
Yeah.
Just see what you say. Say what you see. Just like that's good enough. We're good. We're gonna move on. Oh, what is he like? Floor. There's Tony Floor Bombino. Gotcha. All right.
I can't say that non-crime monikers are any better. I was in San Francisco and there was a shop, a flooring shop, and it was called Linoleum Larry's. So like, there you go. That's what Larry sells. So
that sounds like that old Letterman bit where he goes to the house. It's like the nothing but lampshades.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the next, like across the street to nothing but lamps.
Yeah. Okay, Frank, it's now, we want to thank you for the incredible amount of research and authenticity that may be going into yours. Because if I know these guys, we just did a quick Google search, and that's all I would do. But
well, I think it's Michael's turn though, right?
I think at this point we go to your second, and then we'll ping pong to go.
Okay.
So you get 4, and they each get 2, ping ponging
Oh.
between them. So,
okay.
So Michael, what do you got?
Or Michael or
Frank?
Frank?
Sure.
So I'm sorry. No, Frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. Where are we here? I am going to go with you know how in the mob there's lots of rules.
Yeah.
You know, like you can never fool around with another member's wife or girlfriend, and you can never talk to the cops, and no facial hair, you know, all kinds of stuff really. For a bunch of outlaws, these guys have you know, quite a few rules and a lot of discipline. And there was a lesser known rule that every single family across the country had to have at least one guy named Fat Tony. So, you know, I'm kidding, of course, but I actually only know of 3 Fat Tonys, and there's the one from New York, the one from Kansas City, and the one from Springfield. So, you know, the first of those Fat Tonys is Fat Tony Salerno. And there's a rule amongst mob historians and writers that you have to refer to Fat Tony Salerno as cigar chomping. You know, you have to describe him as the cigar chomping boss of the Genovese family, or the cigar chomping labor racketeer, or the cigar chomping RICO defendant, or whatever it is. So you have to be careful not to confuse the cigar chomping Fat Tony Salerno with Carmine the Cigar Galante, or Nicky Cigars Santora, or Nicky Cigars Marangelo, or Bobby the Cigar De Luca, or Americo the Cigar Petrillo, or, you know, you get the point. But back to Fat Tony, you know, there was another cigar chomping Fat Tony out of Kansas City named Fat Tony Gizzo. And he looked pretty similar to Fat Tony Salerno, but he didn't seem as deadly serious as Fat Tony Salerno did. He seemed more like a fun-loving, jolly good fellow who was very sociable and even approachable. And one thing I like about Fat Tony Gizzo is that when he testified in front of the Kefauver committee, they asked him if it was true that he carried around a lot of money in his pocket. And he said, "Do you want to see it?" And he whipped out this giant roll of bills and started peeling off $100 bills, counting out 100, 200, 300. And so this was in front of a room full of senators and congressmen and people who were interested in cracking down on organized crime back in the 50s. And so that caused a real ruckus and, you know, just kind of typified the mob life in a lot of ways. And Fat Tony Gizzo just seemed to not have a care in the world while he was being grilled by these senators and congressmen and counting out his bankroll for him. So
his big mistake was when they asked him to whip out a notarized documentation detailing the entire list of and who was in the mafia. He's like, "Oh, here, you want this?
I got it right here."
Right. Again, some intuitively, you're on to something, Michael, because they did ask him about the mafia, and of course, everybody else who was testifying just clammed up and I don't know what you're talking about. But Gizzo actually kind of slipped up and admitted to the existence. Then he later tried to backpedal, and it was pretty awkward there for a little while. Boy. And my things might have got pretty hot for him. I don't know, but
ask him about aliens and Area 51 next.
Fat Tony from Springfield. And he just goes to show you that Fat Tony has to be one of the most quintessential mob nicknames ever, because if it wasn't, the guys who created The Simpsons would have chosen a different nickname for the Springfield mob boss, but they didn't, because they knew that the American public would want or even expect a cartoon mafia boss to be named Fat Tony, because even though every mob family doesn't really have at least one guy named Fat Tony, it definitely seems like they do.
Yeah.
Or at least like they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does lots of cardio, Fat Tony, I'm sure, like very trim Tony.
Used to be Fat Tony, but now lost some weight. What happens if Fat Tony goes on a diet? You can no longer, is he still Fat Tony, or is he
Peloton Tony doesn't sound as good. I don't think. Hey, do we have a certified Italian in Richard?
Yes, you do. Well, a quarter Italian, but my last name will will lead you to believe otherwise.
Okay, all right. And I know, the Mafia isn't only Italian, especially in your book, Frank the Mafia and the Machine. It was, as a person with Irish heritage, it was kind of interesting to learn how much diversity was in employment within the machine, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the Mafia, which was the Italian organization, but if you think of it as syndicated crime or the syndicate, the real true network that spanned the country and was involved in so many different things, then yeah, it's absolutely Irishmen galore, a lot of Jewish gangsters working right alongside their Italian counterparts, and so on and so forth. Yeah, for sure.
All right, Michael, what is your choice?
Richard kind of alluded to this earlier, and I really like the idea of it, at least in relation to this gentleman, Donald, the Wizard of Odds Angelini, who was, he feels like his nickname was just like workshop down in San Diego, that like he went into the writer's room and they're like, what are we going to call you? Is it going to be Chips? Is it going to be something to do with extra points or shaving points? And it's like, you know what? The Wizard of Odds, and it's a long nickname and it's ridiculous and it tells you exactly what it is and it's kind of cheeky. It's kind of fun. It's kind of just like, I don't know. Oh, what a fun nickname. Nobody probably ever really called him that. It was probably like a newspaper nickname or something. Yeah. But so this guy, Donald Angelini, worked with like the Chicago Mafia, and he helped. I guess he was a capo for their their wagering and racketeering and gambling operations there, and I don't have too much information about him. I just love the nickname. It fits right into what he does as his kind of, illegal operations lifestyle. I haven't seen a bunch, there's a bunch like you mentioned, like Ice Pick, whatever, or the guy that beats the guy with the 9-iron. But like, to be so specific about what it is, your actual job within the organization, I find pretty interesting. We don't have like a podcast nicknames. It's not like it's Richard
the Mike. You got the Mike.
Mike Manfred. Well, it would be Michael the Mike Manfred.
Yeah, I'm saying that'd be you. Yeah.
If I had to give Richard a nickname, it would be
Deadpan.
Deadpan.
Richard, you have one of the very best deadpans in the business. So can I hang that nickname on you right now, Deadpan?
I appreciate that. I'll take it.
Well, we are at our halftime, and at this point, I just want to ask Frank to remind folks out there where they could get his latest book. You can order it online. Where can you get it?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so Mafia Dreams by Frank Hayde is available on Amazon. But if you want to do a solid for an independent author, not just me, but all independent authors, you can go to BookBaby Bookshop, the BookBaby Bookshop, and then just Google Mafia Dreams or search for Mafia Dreams within the BookBaby Bookshop. And I'm able to keep twice as much money that way. And it doesn't cost you a dime more than it would on Amazon. So thank you.
And I think that's how I got mine. And I was able to, you can basically email it to yourself to your Kindle address, and then you have it in your Kindle just like you would if you got it through Amazon. So you're supporting independent authors, you're supporting Frank, you're helping write his next book by supporting this book. I would also say, since you can probably click on your name on Amazon or elsewhere and find the other books, I did have the Italian Gardens book also. And as a kid who, went to like a homecoming dinner there, it was so cool to kind of get educated about the history that came before, the 80s when I ate there, and to know how much of a cultural centerpiece it is for that city that I grew up in. So that was, what was it like to work with the family and write that book, Frank?
Well, it was great. It was just such a positive experience because that represents the 99% of the Italian American community in Kansas City that's all positive, that just, I'm talking about sports and arts and culture and business and entrepreneurship and religion and family and traditions and food and all that stuff. The real stuff, of the Italian American experience, with the Mafia just being an outlier, right? Which is why we're interested in it, because it's unusual, it's different. But that really goes into all that good stuff. And Carl DiCapo, who was really the institution, kind of a living legend in Casey, he just died earlier this year. God rest his soul, 95 years old when he finally passed. And they're going to be honoring his life this coming Sunday at the Royals game, the last game of the season before the game. So, it was a real honor for me, honestly, to do that, to be hired by them, by that family, to work on that book. And my family had been going to Italian Gardens since it opened back in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt a connection to all that. And it was really great to help keep those stories alive.
That's cool. All right. So the next name will be our next story that we tell. So Frank, you're now on your third name.
Okay.
So what do you got?
Okay. So for my third, I have a very well-known gangster out of New York, the boss of the Genovese family, Vincent Gigante.
The Chin.
So, yeah, you'll notice I left his nickname out because all I had to do was point to my chin. And that's why it was such a great nickname, because it had this tactical purpose. Well, first, I guess we should talk about how he got it. Two different schools of thought on that. Some people say that it came from when he was just a boy and his mom would shout for him out in the neighborhood to come inside. She'd say, Vincenzo, Vincenzo. And so the Chin got abbreviated to Chin, and his buddies, his boyhood pals, started calling him Chin, and then the Chin. But he was also a boxer. He was a pretty good heavyweight boxer. And, you take one on the chin, or you got a good chin. That's what they say about boxers. If they can, take a punch really well, that they have a good chin. And he did have a good chin. So he might have got his nickname that way. But it was such a great nickname because it had this tactical purpose, whereas his guys were ordered. You could never speak the man's name. If you were conversing with somebody else and you had to enter, him into the conversation to say that, okay, he gave the order, or it's okay with him, or whatever, you just point to your chin. And that way you could never say his name, and his name was rarely ever captured on any wiretaps or anything like that, because these guys would all they would just point to their chins.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome. I almost had him on my list, but for a different nickname.
Oh,
yeah, I almost had him.
I know
on
where
there
you're going.
As the Odd Father.
Yeah. Well,
because
good one. And I'll just say you just took my fourth. My fourth one was that.
All right, stepping all over people's toes as per tradition. So I will back off on the explanation.
No, you go, please.
Oh, sure. So he was he basically feigned insanity for about 12 years to try and build a defense against having to go to prison. He would wander around New York in his bathrobe, mumbling to himself. And this was his attempt to try and build an insanity plea. That, well, you can't send him to jail. Look at him. He's a crazy old man. And of course, later on, he finally, after he was arrested and convicted, admitted, this was all an act. So the Odd Father nickname comes from that, if I'm not mistaken.
Frank, is that your story also?
Well, yeah, that was going to be my fourth. See, I was going to kind of throw this twist in there by having two of my choices refer back to the same guy, because he had the Chin and he had the Odd Father, and they're both such great nicknames. And Richard just pretty much summarized it. You'd see him walking around Greenwich Village, honestly, like drooling on the sidewalk. I mean, he really played this act up. But my favorite story about the Odd Father, I mean, just what a great nickname. I don't think he coined it himself, of course, but whoever did, I think it was probably the New York Post, because they were always giving guys nicknames like that. And I think they called him the Odd Father. But my favorite story about the Odd Father, the FBI shows up at his house one day to serve a search warrant. They find him in the shower with an umbrella. I mean, You
That's
can't
pretty
make
awesome.
that up, right? I mean,
My
That's
wife
pretty awesome.
sometimes wears like a hair thing when she doesn't want to wash her
That's
hair
right.
exactly, but she still wants to take a shower. So, it's not that odd.
That's how I got out of jury duty the last time they called me. So, Richard, did you actually say your choice, your third
No,
one?
I didn't.
Okay.
I did not
Okay.
say my third
Okay.
choice. I will be brief on this one.
Okay.
It is Thomas Bilotti, and his nickname was Tommy the Toupee,
Oh. Oh boy.
which is an example of one of those nicknames that I don't think you say to somebody's face.
Yeah.
In fact, it was very well known that he did not like the nickname and you did not use that nickname around him. So it was something that was really, it was picked up on in wiretaps with other gangsters talking to their compatriots about Tommy
Oh.
the Toupee, but it was not something that anyone said to him. And again, another on the nose nickname. Just the man had one of those like George Costanza when he got the toupee
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
looking things where it's like the color's not quite right and it kind of sticks out at the edges a little bit. And everyone's supposed to pretend that he doesn't have a toupee, but everyone knows that he's got a really bad rug on. And I think it just goes to show that not all nicknames are nicknames of respect. And the mob is really, when you think of the mob, you think of respect and showing deference to to the people around you.
Mhm.
That's not always the case, especially with some of these nicknames. And calling a mob boss the toupee kind of goes to show that there is a lot of irony and kind of backstabbing with
Yeah.
these nicknames kind of taking place.
That is
He was
interesting to hear it that it would be picked up by uh FBI guys listening over a wire or something like that. That's interesting to kind of observe how much mob culture was transmitted through the persons themselves, but also through being overheard or listened to unsuspectingly by themselves. So, you're sorry. What were you
sure.
going to say? He was what?
I was just gonna say he was just to give a little bit background on him. He was one of the underbosses of the Gambino crime family, and he was actually assassinated in the murder of Paul Castellano, who was the Gambino boss that John Gotti knocked off to basically become the new boss of the Gambino crime family. So there's some historical significance to him as well as just having a bad toupee.
Okay. All right. So Michael's about to list the last one, but before we do that, Frank, were there any runners up or any uh, nicknames that you have considered, but thought you might not go with?
Not really.
Okay.
I after I came up with my four, which was really only three because two of them applied to the same guy.
Yeah.
I kind of stopped thinking about it. But there are some really good ones. There's some just terrific ones out there. You run across them every now and then. And I hadn't thought about the Wizard of Oz in a long, long time. And if I would have Googled Mafia nicknames, I'm not even sure that one would have come up. I think Michael probably had to dig a little deeper for that one. But
Oh, interesting.
I do want to thank him for mentioning that because the Wizard of Oz brings to mind the Wizard of Oz, which brings to mind Kansas, which brings to mind Kansas City, which brings to mind my new books, which are available now.
Plug away. Plug
There
away.
we go. Nailed it.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll get one last plug after we reveal the winners, but not before we have Michael tell us their last choice.
Our last choice is Tommy Karate Patera, who was a drug trafficker and hitman or murderer for the Bonanno crime family. And he apparently was made fun of a bunch when he was a kid for having a really high voice and started getting interested in martial arts, as well as having kind of an affinity for the Green Hornet and Bruce Lee. And so when he was like a younger man, he kind of got into martial arts and learned karate and kind of really delved into kind of like an Eastern kind of philosophy and teachings and martial arts and really studying that sort of stuff. and then he'd use it to, possibly hurt people and maybe kill people. But, the name Tommy Karate is just so good. I love it because it has a little bit of rhyming to it. I love it because it kind of really speaks to something so personal, it seems like, with him, that and also you don't want to mess with Tommy Karate. Well, why? Well, he knows karate. What do you think? The guy knows karate. It's in his nickname. I think one of the most interesting things about like looking at and kind of researching a little bit and reading about different nicknames is how some of them are so funny, or somebody knows or whatever they have, but they're all like these horrible, tremendously horrible people that have committed murders or larcenies and other just like the lifestyle choices that they've made are just like horrendous compared to like, oh, what, they got a silly nickname. And it's such a strange like dichotomy of just like this the person you've chosen to be, and yet also let's make fun of him because he wears a toupee.
Yeah.
It's so odd. And Tommy Karate, like, oh, Tommy Karate could have been this kid that I knew. Oh yeah, Tommy Karate, he was really good at karate when he was like 13 or 8 or whatever. But then when he's like this guy that's like locked up, he's serving a life sentence in prison, it kind of loses its luster a little bit. It definitely loses its sense of like mirth. And it's like, okay, well, is he still applying those same chokeholds and leg sweeps? And is he making like toilet wine nunchucks or whatever like in the joint and like killing people that way? I don't know. It makes me a little depressed.
I heard what he's doing. He's still in prison, and he's actually painting and selling some of his paintings. Yeah.
Wow.
Johnny Painting.
He's managed to sell some original works of art.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's of a Japanese orientation. I wonder if it's a lot of.
You cannot underestimate how serious, how heavy of a guy he was. I mean, he could make people's blood run cold when he walked in the room, or even if just by bringing up his name. And Willie the Rat was the same way. I mean, Kansas City. I mean, that was a name that could literally just stop you in your tracks. And I appreciate what you said, Michael, because it is important to mention, that there's a humorous side to all this, but it's definitely we're talking about some really, really bad dudes. And maybe if there was a runner-up, now that I think about it, that might be Greg the Grim Reaper Scarpa, because that's kind of basically what this all comes down to, what we're dealing with here.
The Grim Reaper. That sounds much more real than.
Yeah.
I've got two points before we wrap up. One of them specifically about Tommy Karate, which is it's a good thing that he got into something like karate and not taekwondo, or Tommy Taekwondo just is not. There's the alliteration, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well.
Tommy, and then Tommy Tai Chi. You're like, I don't know. He seems pretty calm. Slow.
Yeah. Tommy Capoeira. Yeah.
Capoeira.
And the second one is just a general. Do you think that if you're a mobster and you don't have a nickname, you're disappointed?
Oh yeah.
Like, do you wind up like trying to like give yourself a nickname, and your underlings are like, "Yeah, I'm just not feeling it, boss."
There's like a Billy Bolisario out there who's always eating beans and no one is picking up on it.
Yeah.
It's just like he's just begging. He's like there's Paul. What's Paul doing? What's he doing with that ping pong paddle? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
matter. Not matter.
I wear an ornate. I wear a daffodil in my collar every day wherever I go, but nobody gives me the nickname Daffodil. Okay, dudes, this was a lot of fun. Frank, before we do the official rating, so list off. You said Book Baby.
Yeah, the Book Baby Bookshop.
Okay.
Book Baby Bookshop, and then just search for Mafia Dreams, and it's just another couple of clicks away. Super easy. That's Mafia Dreams, a true crime saga of young men at the end of an era in Kansas City.
Okay, we'll remember to link it when we put up the show notes. I know I can do it up on YouTube for sure. But now it's the judgment time. They call me Jeff the Disappointer Hopkins, especially when Michael and Richard try to go up next to such a well-researched and funny guy as Frank Hayde. So we're going to go with Willie the Rat Comisano, Fat Tony Gizzo, not the cigar chomping Fat Tony Slam, Vincent the Chin Gigante, and I'm scooping around to go with Greg the Grim Reaper. What was his last name?
Scarpa.
Greg the Grim Reaper Scarpa.
Look him up. You'll learn a lot there. Yeah. He's
Okay.
the guy that went down to the South. The FBI actually hired him to go down south during civil rights movement back in the early 60s when some Northern activists disappeared in the South. FBI actually hired Greg Scarpa to go down there and stick a gun in a guy's mouth and obtain a confession.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Playing both sides, sounds like.
And there's a lot more to the Greg Scarpa story. If you want to read some fascinating stuff that you can't put down, yeah, go for Greg Scarpa.
I will check that out. So thanks very much, Richard and Michael. But of course, thanks to our guest author, Frank Hayde, of multiple books. There's I have read the Italian Gardens book, The Mafia and the Machine, and now I'm reading Mafia Dreams. But of course, there's the other book about the jazz player and / boxer. What was that again?
Stan Levy, jazz heavyweight.
Cool. So thanks so much, Frank. This has been the Mount Rushmore of Mob Nicknames. I'm always Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael, the Mike Winfield.